Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Historical Geology 1404. In case you can't tell by the fact that I am sitting down and my feet are up, today is an exam review. How many of y'all remember that? Exam 2 review. So, Exam 2 covers Module 2. Module 2, we learned more about evolution, adaptation, inherited traits, mutations, how we can artificially influence that process, all of those things. Told you about a few examples that you were aware of or not aware of for how we have done that, or how that occurs in nature. Speciation, all these things. So, it will cover Module 2 material, but that's not to say that Module 1 material is off the table, right? Because just like with the other class, this one builds on itself. So I may reference things from Module 1, assuming that you remember what those things are, to ask you to explain something we talked about in Module 2. It's perfectly acceptable for me to do. All the usual suspects, short answer, multiple choice, true, false, ordering, matching, yada, yada, yada. Now, every now and then, I'll go ahead and change the questions on here. So give me a second just so I can double check how many questions are on here. There are 14 questions on this one. Okay? Probably the shortest exam we've taken in my classes yet. It's not me telling you it's going to be significantly easier, but there are far fewer questions. Okay? That means that you still have the same 500-minute limit for 14 questions. Give yourself every advantage you need. I've already given you every advantage you could ask for. Your notes and all the time in the world you could want, right? And this exam review today to help your notes get where they should be, right? Give yourself the next best thing, which is enough time to complete it and the right mind space to do it. Don't do it in the middle of the night. Don't do it while you're hungry. Don't do it while you're babysitting 8 children, maybe, you know? You what? All right, put yourself in a situation for success. I've done what I can with the situation as far as I can control it. The rest is on you. There's almost no scenario when I should have to get an email from any of you saying, hey, I need you to reopen the exam, or it's submitted because I fell asleep while I was taking it. Can you please wipe that submission? That should not happen because I've given you plenty of warning not to put yourself in that situation. Okay? Sound good? It will remain open for 24 hours, meaning that it will close tomorrow. So that on Thursday, we can come in, discuss it, assuming everyone's taking it, right? And you will know what your grades are by then. Speaking of grades, I think I sent a message out yesterday saying that I have completely caught up with all the grading as far as I'm aware. I went through every assignment, anything that was resubmitted, all of that. I have gone through and done that for all my classes because for that last week of the play that I was in, man, my time was just gone, right? So I kind of fell behind a little bit, but yesterday I devoted my entire day to catching up on everything. So the grade that you see on there right now should be accurate. Yeah. Should. Is it a new or a second attempt? On which lab?
I have DM grade from my lab 3, ethics and fossils.
Oh, the discussion board?
Yeah.
Or the lab?
Both of them. Both lab 3 and 4.
Well, I didn't grade any lab 4s because the due date for that's not over yet.
Well, lab 3.
Huh. Okay, I'll double check that.
Oh yeah, mine's not looks like a D2.
All right. I may have accidentally skipped that one assignment. Lab 3s for H30C. Okay, I'll do that today because tomorrow is when they pull grades again for your grade reports. So if you don't like the grade that's on there right now, after I've, created the Lab 3s, assuming that you've turned in a Lab 3 and it's relevant to you, you really got to go in and change something because at this point we are slightly over halfway through the class. By slightly, I mean we are in week 6. There's a couple weeks left. Okay. And I did throw zeros on assignments that are well past due. And that's probably throwing off whatever your grade is right now. It is not too late to turn those things in, right? But if you want your grade changed before it's pulled tomorrow, you got to do something about it now. And that goes for my online students as well. Hopefully you're watching this in enough time to make a difference. My high school students, I should say. This is not relevant to anyone who isn't in high school. The zeros on your grade are, but not the grade report I'm talking about. Any questions about that? Okay. The ball is in your court, folks. The time is yours. Yes.
So will the test mention like specific eras, like the Jurassic?
So the question was, will the test mention specific time periods? Not deeply. In reference, perhaps, for sure. But we are not yet at the point where I can say, during what time period did this happen? That's what Module 3 is about. Okay? So your final exam will absolutely, it'll be fair game to have that sort of stuff on there. Not for this one. This one is mostly terminology from Module 2, for example, or explain how this aspect of evolution works as we described it in class, right? All Module 2 stuff. Will one of you grab the door for me? Appreciate that, Emily. Thank you.
So that would there be like when this fossil lived and when it went extinct, like on lab 3?
No. So again, remember, lab content isn't so much on lecture tests. This is a great question. Thank you. You will have a lab exam that comes up late next week, I would say, to expect that. Probably Thursday next week. Okay. After you've had enough time to complete Lab 4. Lab 5 isn't really something that the lab exam goes over, just like the same way as it was in 1403. So I'll give you the lab exam before expecting you to have Lab 5 turned in. Lab 5, I know I'm kind of deviating from the subject here. I'll come back to it in a second. Lab 5 is a research exercise, okay, where you'll pick an organism from the list that I give you, and you research it and then write a short report on it. That's not really something that I can test you on the lab exam. So the lab exam is going to be a little different and not reliant on finishing Lab 5. But no, there is not going to be any tell me when this organism lived on this exam. Totally fair game again for the Module 3 exam, though, because we do go over time periods. Okay.
What about the shell structures for like the Nautilus and I forgot what the other one was called?
Ammonoid.
Ammonoid. With like, you know the shell structure?
I do discuss changes in organisms over time in Module 2. So referencing that is certainly possible. And I'll leave it at that. Yes.
So can you explain how evolution is not natural selection?
How evolution is not natural selection. Evolution is a change in inherited traits over time, right? It's the change itself, fueled by mutation. caused by mutation, I should say. Okay. That is carried on through the gene pool. Natural selection is the process by which organisms that do not have mutations that are beneficial to surviving in that environment either survive or die. So related to each other, but different processes. Let's say okay, this is going to get a little dark here. If I set up a laser in this room exactly 5 feet and 6 inches above the ground, and then I had us all stand up and I turned the laser on and it swept across the entire room, some of us would get beheaded, some of us would not, right? Our genes controlled how tall we would get. But the laser sweeping across the room, eliminating some of us because we had a trait of being too tall in that environment, is a different thing. I die because I am 5'11", and yes, I would lose my head, right? Lydia would not. She would live. I would not. Because of genes. The natural selection, I know this is kind of an artificial situation, but you understand what I'm saying. I'm changing something in the environment. I could not cut it, but Lydia could. Does that help you understand the difference there? Okay. Is she being sassy? I mean, we are 20 minutes into class. It's not like it's that early. Let her rip, Lydia. All right. Good questions so far. Keep them coming.
Will you go over the specific people like Charles Darwin?
We did discuss Charles Darwin and his contributions and his theory of evolution and his observations in the Galapagos Islands. We covered all of that. So yes, that is fair game. If you're not familiar with my process for these exam reviews yet, my advice is always pull out your notes because you can use them during the exam and read them to yourself. And if there's anything in there that you feel like you cannot, to your satisfaction, explain back to yourself, that's a good thing to ask me a question about right now. For those of you that are watching this online, I'm sorry the ship has sailed to ask your questions. I always remind you in the lecture before the exam review, so this would have been 5 days ago when I posted the last lecture, that you needed to email me with your questions prior to me making this recording today. So you've had 5 days to do it. I did not receive any questions. So hopefully you take me up on that offer for the final when it comes around. Yes?
What is eccentricity?
Eccentricity is one of the ways that our planet moves around the sun. Oh, that's nice. I let a student use my whiteboard wall in here yesterday, and I showed her where the pens were and everything, and then I went back in my office, and this is my first time opening the drawer since she was in here. She organized all my pens and stacked all of my cloths. It's actually, she's in PTK as well. Kat, I think was her name. Yeah, she organized everything in my drawer. It's very kind. All right. So here is, let me get red as well so you can help distinguish it. Here's the sun, right? Our orbit around the sun is not a perfect circle. It fluctuates, goes back and forth between more circular, though not perfectly so, and elliptical, like that. On about a 100,000 year cycle, it will fluctuate between that. So at 100,000 years, we will be the furthest away from the sun in an elliptical orbit, And then 100,000 years later, our orbit will have changed to the point where we are closer to the sun in a circular orbit. Now remember, we orbit the sun once a year, right? So every 100,000 orbits of those, we are gradually becoming more elliptical. And then 100,000 years later, we have returned to more circular. Yes, it's a cycle. It's one of the 3 Milankovitch cycles.
Does that change the amount of hours in a day, or does it stay the same?
No, not to the point that we measure it. Okay. It does, however, affect climate. Why?
Temperature,
Why would temperature be affected?
like far from the sun.
When we're out here, we're further from the sun, receiving less radiation, correct? When we're out here, more radiation we receive less radiation, and that radiation, some portion of it is also reflecting off of oceans and glaciers. Because we are absorbing less radiation, Earth cools, which is why we've been able to tie Milankovitch cycles to glacial cycles. Okay? One of the causes, at least in the last couple of million years, that we can track this process seems to be lining up pretty well with the eccentricity of the Milankovitch cycle, which we call eccentricity. There's also obliquity and precession, right? Where obliquity is our angle that we're at and spinning around that angle, our tilt, axial tilt, and the precession is our wobble on that tilt. We go back and forth like this around our axial tilt. These 3 things are called Milankovitch cycles, and they seem to tie pretty well into the glacial cycle system on our planet. Okay. What else?
How do you tell the difference between a nautiloid and an ammonoid?
Say that again.
How do you tell the difference between a nautiloid and an ammonoid?
The difference between a nautiloid and an ammonoid. Well, let's look at some actual physical examples, shall we? Nothing beats getting your hands-on experience. All right. I'll put this over here so that the camera can see it as well. In a nautiloid, the easiest way to tell is to look at the direction that the sutures are pointed in, or open to, I should say. Remember, the sutures are these sort of walls between each individual septa or chamber, okay? So in a nautiloid, it is going to be open, concave toward the opening of the shell, where the animal was living at that time, okay? Right there. Notice how it is concave towards it, open towards it, cupped toward it, however you want to think of it. With an ammonoid, it's the other way around. It's going to be convex towards the opening. However, that may be a little difficult to tell because ammonoids also tend to have more wiggly sutures, like you can see here. There are some even crazier, wigglier word. Yes? No? For today? Yes?
Is that real?
Yeah, these are real. Here's one that has wigglier sutures, right? Starting to get pretty jagged there. However, the overall, when you look at the 2 ends of it, they are still concave, backwards, convex toward the opening of the shell. Okay? Nautiloids, concave toward the opening. Ammonoids, convex towards the opening. Also, ammonoids often have more elaborate suture patterns. Ammonoids have that. Nautiloids have pretty much always kept their basic, just cup shape sutures. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I have an actual nautiloid shell here because they are still alive. Endangered but still living in the ocean. And you can see still has that same basic concave cupped pattern towards the opening of the shell, right? Nautiloid. Cool? Deal. Good deal. Why did the ammonoids go extinct? There's that natural selection, my friends. This is a little bit of a spoiler for module 3, but that's okay. You guys don't mind, right? Ammonoids went extinct when the dinosaurs did. Why did the dinosaurs go extinct? Yep. They could not change fast enough to adapt to the conditions after that asteroid impact. Okay. Ammonoids in the ocean, similar situation. Why did the nautiloids survive when the ammonoids didn't? Is an excellent question. And there are some theories about that. We presume that they preyed upon most of the same food sources. The big difference most likely had to do with body size. In the same way that mammals and smaller reptiles were able to survive the extinction and dinosaurs were not. If you are a smaller animal and rely upon less food, and food that in itself does not require large food sources. So like if you're a rat and you just eat, or a squirrel and you just eat like nuts, or you're a rat and you just like eat like insects and small reptiles, versus a dinosaur that relies upon gigantic prey to eat to sustain itself. You're more likely to survive as that rat because your food sources are more plentiful and probably fit into an ecological niche a lot less strictly. So when the Tyrannosaurus Rex's biggest food sources died off and they couldn't find anything big enough to eat, they went pretty quick. But for the rats that eat bugs and dead things, there were lots of dead things, right? You're good. So because the ammonoids were far more widespread and far larger than the nautiloids at that time, it seems likely that the ammonoids' food sources were not able to sustain them anymore because they died off. But the nautiloids, being smaller body size and potentially living at different depths or different ecological zones, were able to hold on. And the nautiloids came first, by the way. They have a longer fossil record than the ammonoids. So there's something, I don't want to say satisfying, but there's something poetic about the nautiloids came first, and then the ammonoids diversified maybe 20 million years later, became far more successful. We see way more ammonoids than nautiloids for most of the fossil record. Nautiloids are still there, just kind of like that black sheep of the family, I guess you could say, still there. And then the ammonoids die off, and the nautiloids remain. Nautiloids just got like, ha, we had the last laugh. And now, of course, they're endangered because they've been overhunted and overfished for their mother of pearl shells. But answer your question? Okay. Yeah.
So what is rapid speculation?
Speciation. Rapid speciation is when you have a lot of new species arise. Remember that mutations are random, right? I could be experiencing a mutation somewhere in my DNA right now. I will not experience the result of that mutation unless it leads to some terrible genetic deformity like cancer, right? More than likely, most of those mutations are going to be manifested later down my genetic pool, right? My genetic line, as some change in a trait that is controlled by the DNA that got altered. This is always happening. But most of those mutations either don't end up manifesting a physical change or manifest a physical change that does not matter, right? What difference does it make really if I am born heterochromatic with one blue eye and one green eye or one blue eye? It really makes no difference, right? But what if I am born with 2 thumbs on each hand, right? What if I am born with earlobes that are 2 inches long? The earlobe thing may not make much of a difference. It may affect my sense of balance a little bit differently. For those of you that don't know, we think that the reason why we have earlobes at all is because they help absorb and dampen some of the noise that our ears absorb. They don't really serve much of a purpose, except that when you conduct tests on them, it seems that as noise goes in our ear, some of it, that reverberation is kind of siphoned off and absorbed by this fleshy sac on the bottom of our ears, instead of being totally absorbed on our inner ear and potentially damaging it. So other than a slight difference in that, it really wouldn't make a difference. But 2 thumbs on each hand might make a big difference, right? So some are going to be positive, some are going to be negative, and most are going to be irrelevant. If there is some change in the environment or multiple changes in the environment, some of what originally may have been an irrelevant mutation may actually prove to be either positive or negative. And so rapid speciation tends to happen when species encounter drastically different environments that necessitate change or die sort of situations. And the ones that can adapt the fastest, that are most prone to that adaptation, we will often see a variety of species in the fossil record shortly after they encounter that environment. Like the finches in the Galapagos. We believe it only took maybe a couple hundred years, maybe 1,000 years, maybe, for all those different varieties of finches to appear on all the islands. They were able to adapt pretty quick. What else?
I'm still thinking about the earlobe thing, I don't know why.
Yeah.
But does having attached earlobes or like detachments mess with that study?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I'm not aware of that making a difference. The detached versus attached earlobes, I'm positive someone somewhere has done a study to see whether or not, which one of those came first and which one is an adaptation. I do not know personally. I do know something else, though. Y'all might find this interesting. How many of you are lactose intolerant? To any extent. If milk or milk products in any way upsets your tummy, even if it is only a little bit, you are lactose intolerant. Hands up high. Okay, it's way more than you. It's way more of you, but you just don't want to admit it. Okay? Lactose intolerance is the normal, natural gene. Lactose tolerance is a mutation that appeared thousands of years ago. Only about 30% of humanity is lactose tolerant, which means that out of how many of us are in this room? 11, 3, 6, 9, 12. Only 4 of us, statistically, are actually lactose tolerant. The rest of us, intolerant to some degree. Why? Well, our bodies naturally produce an enzyme that breaks down lactose. It's called lactate. Okay? Our bodies stop producing lactate about the time we turn 3 because our body naturally expects us to be weaned off of milk by then. Okay? We don't need it anymore. At that point, our bodies develop to the point where we can digest and absorb solid food. Sorry, I'm just making sure my camera doesn't shut off. Okay, it looks like it's back up. Solid food. Okay. So really, nobody should be drinking milk past that. Our bodies are not designed to absorb it. Okay. I personally don't drink milk. Before I even figured out that I had a small degree of lactose intolerance, I stopped drinking it. There's no need to drink it. Everyone's like, oh, but the calcium. You get more than enough calcium by just having a healthy diet, right? We don't actually need milk. However, picture this scenario. You're in Africa. You're in a tribe. There's a famine. There hasn't been rain for a couple seasons. The plants that you typically eat aren't doing very well. The animals you typically hunt have moved on or been hunted out. But you do have goats or camels or some variety of cattle, right? That you use not for meat, but for milk purposes, for your infants. What do you eat? Do you kill your cow? Or do you think to yourself, this cow produces milk, babies survive on it. As long as we keep giving our cows water, they can eat all these plants that we can't eat, and then we can drink their milk and sustain ourselves a little bit longer. That's what these tribes did in Africa, okay? A long time ago, thousands of years ago, remember, okay? They survive. Some of them seem to react better to that milk than the rest. Some of them don't have negative reaction to that milk. Everyone gets nutrition from it, but some of them get a little sick from it too. Most of them get a little sick from it too. But a few people don't. The people who can consume that milk the most successfully with the least negative reactions have the mutation, a random mutation that occurred in those individuals to be able to keep producing lactate past the age of 3. That positive mutation, lending to those individuals' survival, got passed through the gene pool on and on and on until these tribes were filled with people with lactose-tolerant genes. Now skip forward thousands of years, and these people have moved out into Europe and Asia, crossed oceans, until now, here we are at our current modern world, and about 30% of everyone on the planet has that lactose-tolerant gene. The rest of us don't. Given time, it'll become 50%, then 60, then 70, then 80. Assuming that gene does not get eliminated randomly, assuming that gene does not become a negative mutation and cause the death of everyone that contains it, it will eventually spread its way through most or all of the population, excluding, isolated populations, of course, but that's true of everything. Interesting, huh? Lactose intolerance is the normal, at least for now. Everyone's like, oh, I can't have that. I'm intolerant. And everyone's like, oh, I'm so sorry. So are 70% of everyone else. Right?
Just tolerate. I still ingest dairy products.
You just don't eat dairy products?
No, I still eat it.
Oh, you still eat it? Yeah. When I have milk, I have almond milk. I like almond milk, and it doesn't like make me feel icky. I love cheese sometimes. Ice cream, though, I haven't bought ice cream in years. That's not to say I haven't had it. Every now and then when I'm at a friend's house or something, they'll serve ice cream. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll have some. But like, man, I used to hit that Moose Tracks hard. Love me some good Moose Tracks ice cream. But every time I'd eat it, I'd feel a little
ice cream, right?
Pistachio ice cream.
The best one.
Yeah, actually pistachio is pretty good. But I'd feel a little afterward. I never get physically sick from it. I don't have that bad. And like I said, it affects people to different degrees, but I definitely felt icky after every time. So I haven't had ice cream. I haven't bought ice cream for myself in 3 to 4 years. Fun tangent. Yeah.
So why are all vertebrates share near embryonic states?
Why do all vertebrates share near embryonic states? Good question. This goes down to our common ancestry. Okay. Vertebrates branched off from invertebrates back when everything was still living in the water. Okay. Which means that our genes are mostly shared. You and me share 99.99999% of our genes. Me and a bat share 98.9% of our genes. Me and I'm trying to think of a platypus share 97.9% of our genes. I'm estimating these, right? Me and a fish share 90% of our genes. Me and a tree share a lot less than that, right? Why? Plants separated off from our ancestors long before we and invertebrates did, long before me and fish did, long before me and bats did. Okay? The common ancestor I share with each one of these things is further and further back in time, meaning that we share fewer and fewer of the same genes. The closer we are genetically related to an organism, the more genes control the embryonic growth before things start to diverge. So for you and me and a fish and an amphibian and a reptile and a turtle and a chicken, we share all the same genes for growing an embryo up to a certain point. And then we start to diverge from each other. Fish and amphibians share more in line with each other than reptiles, birds, and mammals do. And so we kind of separate off there, and the reptiles and mammals and birds kind of look similar for a while. And then we diverge from each other as time goes on because the specific genes that control our species development start to kick in. But for most of that early development, we share the same genes. That's why. You can think of gene development. It's really cool when you think about it this way. You can think of gene development in an embryo as a walk through time, where the first genes that turn on are the same genes that turn on for everything else. And then as time goes on, the sequence of genes that turn on start to be different because evolution has caused us to develop these different genes in each species. Okay? Does that help? Good. Now I'm curious how much of my DNA I share with a tree. I'm gonna look that up real quick while someone else asks a question. Humans share roughly, oh, that's a very wide range. Okay. Humans share roughly 20 to 60% of their DNA with trees, depending on the species of tree, which is fascinating to think that it's different. Let's see. Oh, interesting. The tree that we share the most DNA with, apparently, is the banana tree. We share 60% of the same DNA with the banana tree.
What about bananas themselves?
I mean, yeah, we'll share the same amount with them. Although, bear in mind that banana fruit is... Do y'all know what fruit is?
The thing that holds the seed.
Exactly. This is something that we talk about later in the class, but let's talk about this now since it came up. Fruiting plants grow a fruit around their seeds, specifically to protect the seeds, but also to provide that first initial burst of nutrition that those seeds need when the fruit falls to the ground and a new plant wants to grow, right? It's essentially Christmas present of nutrition for the next generation of those plants. Apples, oranges, bananas, grapes, all of that. Okay? Giving it that burst that it needs to get started in life. It's grown through what's called double fertilization. So the first round of fertilization starts to grow fruit. Okay? A flower absorbs pollen from another organism, of the same species, right? And starts to grow a fruit out of that flower. Then the second fertilization period takes place, and the seeds themselves start to grow inside of that fruit. So really what you're doing when you eat a banana or an orange or an apple, you are eating plant eggs. That's literally what they are if you compare them to the process that we go through. It's been double fertilized, where the first fertilization made the fruit, and the second fertilization caused the development of the seeds inside that fruit. You're eating plant eggs. That's what bananas are. So yeah, they do share a lot of that same DNA, but the seeds inside of the fruit have the whole package. Interesting. Look at all the cool stuff you're learning today. Keep asking good questions.
At what point does a species become like a new species, like via evolution?
Well, that kind of comes down to what we talked about with rapid speciation. That's speciation is a new species deriving from an older one. Whenever a trait causes an organism to become distinctly different physically or behaviorally from an original species, okay, from the original group that it belonged to. So if, for example, Angel's first child was born with some trait that made it significantly different. I don't know, 4 legs. That's a huge example, right? Let's do something different. Extremely thick skin, like rhino skin, right? Very tough, durable skin. Still skin. Still obviously human skin, just significantly thicker than normal human skin. Mutation. A mutation that can get passed on to whatever children that child has later in life. That could be considered the development of a new species. This is actually a very important question because people ask, at what point do mutations in humans give us cause to start calling different populations a different species, right? And there have been positives and negatives to this question. I don't need to name any specific circumstance for you all to understand that at different points during human history, certain groups of humans have considered other groups of humans to be lesser than they are. A different species, in fact. Going so far as to give them different scientific names. I'm sure we're all picking up on what I'm putting down here. So, at what point, what is the required criteria for a new species to show up in humanity?
They can't reproduce with the other one.
There it is. When an organism can no longer reproduce, and make fertile offspring with the original species anymore. If Angel's child with rhino skin can still reproduce with a normal human female, still the same species regardless of the mutation. As a matter of fact, that's why having different colors of eyes, different heights, cultural, like ethnic heights, right? Having different colors of skin, having different colors of hair, all of these things separate us into what we call cultures, ethnicities, and races. But we are still the same species, right? For that fact. Any one human of any race can still reproduce with a human of the other race successfully. Therefore, same species. However, There are people that are contending that that barrier alone cannot be sufficient. There are people out there who are desperately anxious to make the next iteration of humanity. It normally has something to do with better physical performance, better intelligence, things like that.
Is it true that like red hair people that that's what I heard, like they came from like incest, the red hair
Came from where?
incest?
Except from incest.
Oh, incest. Red-haired people?
Yeah.
I know of no science that supports that. Red hair is a mutation, typically found in Irish and Scottish populations. I want to say that there was also red hair that developed. Was it in Spain? I feel like it was somewhere up there. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I looked into red hair, but I have not heard any science that suggests that red hair was a result of incest.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know about that. The big thing that everyone always pokes fun at as being the result of incest, and I apologize if this insults anyone further down the line, bad teeth in English culture, right? Everyone's always like, oh, it's from all the inbreeding, right? Inbreeding between confined genetic populations can have a negative effect on that population. It is proven. Genetic diversity is required for a healthy gene pool. And so if you have a group of people isolated from any other population and they only want to interbreed with each other instead of going out and meeting new people, that's the results. Genetic breakdown. Things like, again, the potential for bad dental development. Okay. Now, I know that that is a commonly held thing. I do not know the science as to whether or not bad teeth in English communities is the result of inbreeding. That's the thing. That's the saying. That's the myth, right? Someone out there may be able to point me in the right direction, say, yes, it is, or no, it's not. And I may actually look it up here in a minute, but it is a proven record. We know for a fact that the more confined the gene pool is, the less healthy the gene pool is.
Like the royal family.
And the chin, I also saw the longer chins, big foreheads.
I mean, these are all mutations. Whether or not they're the result of genetic breakdown or something happened to a gene through the normal evolutionary process of radiation absorption, I don't know. However, what was I going to say? Oh, ostracods, the tiny little microscopic crustaceans that I did my thesis on, right? I think I told you, I think I mentioned this to you before, how I used isotopes in their shells to reconstruct paleoclimate. Well, here's something cool about ostracods. They reproduce through what's called parthenogenesis, okay? When their environment is stable, they are asexual. They fertilize their own eggs inside their own bodies, lay those eggs pop out, and have approximately the same genetic makeup as the parent, okay? I wouldn't exactly call it cloning themselves. It's like putting a piece of paper into a machine, a fax machine, right? What comes out is an exact copy, right? What's happening here is what happens if you take that paper and instead you write down everything on that paper. It'll still contain all the same information. It'll just look a little different, right? You can't exactly, using your own hands and your own skill, exactly reproduce what you made before, but it still contains all the same information. Think of it like that, okay? This is what they do. However, when they are under environmental stress, when their environment changes to the point where they have to adapt, or when their gene pool gets stressed for some reason, okay, they become heterosexual. They actually, some portion of the population will change into males. Like goldfish. You guys know that goldfish can do that? Some species of frog do that too. They can change between males and females. Ostracods do that. And so some portion of the population in response to this environmental stress will change into males so that they can reproduce with each other heterosexually. And this causes genetic diversity in the gene pool, okay? Which helps them adapt and change and survive whatever the environmental stress is. Nature finds a way, baby. Isn't that cool? Okay, what else? Yeah,
So why are viruses not alive?
who can tell me the answer to that? Why do we consider viruses to not be alive?
They can't reproduce in their own.
They can't reproduce on their own. They do replicate. They use that fax machine though. They enter a cell, tear that cell apart, and then make copies of their own code with the pieces of that cell. Is that reproduction?
Yes. No.
They don't really have a genetic code to reproduce. Remember, viruses are RNA. They don't store information. They're little messenger bots. What else? What's another criteria?
They can be killed.
They can't be killed.
Yeah.
Not being able to be killed is a byproduct of not considering them to be alive. So it's kind of can't really justify that, right? What about self-regulation? Do they produce their own energy? Yeah, no, they have to, they burrow into other cells and use their energy to do what they do, right?
Really?
There's no self-reproduction. There's no self-regulation. Why most people don't consider them to be alive. They perform some of the same functions that appear to be alive, but not with the same results, not even of their own accord. They're following their programming, right? Okay, so I did look it up. The stereotype of bad teeth in English people is not primarily due to inbreeding. It's more likely a result of historical factors like poor dental hygiene practices, limited access to dental care in the past, and a diet high in sugar, which have significantly improved in recent decades, making the stereotype largely outdated.
What about the blue eyes?
No, not inbreeding, just a genetic mutation. See about red hair now. No, recessive genetic trait from a mutation.
I can make fun of gingers now.
Yeah, but you can still make fun of red-haired people. Yeah, there are lots of no-soul jokes. My grandmother was a redhead, and my daughter is a redhead. It's recessive, so it'll manifest every now and then with the right genetic parent.
But you have the gene.
I have a red beard. Yeah, it's funny. When I let my beard grow out, it's red and blonde. My hair is black. My beard is red and blonde. It's really confusing for people. It's like I'm all Jew up here, and then I'm just Irish all the way down there.
I'm the only blue eye in my family.
Oh, really? So,
My grandpa from my dad's side and my grandma from my mom's side.
Yeah. So there were 6 kids in my mom's family, and the youngest daughter had blonde hair and blue eyes, but everyone else got brown hair and brown eyes. I am one of 6 in my family, and the youngest daughter has blue hair, blue eyes and blonde hair, and everyone else has dark hair and brown eyes. My daughter is blondish red hair with blue eyes, and my sons both have dark hair and brown eyes. So there is some trait, some genetic, dominant genetic trait in my family, in my genes, that encourages, for some reason, at least one of the daughters to manifest blonde hair and blue eyes while everyone else has darker of both. It's very interesting. And why my beard is red? All of my brothers, there are 4 brothers in my family, and the other 3, black beards. My dad has a black beard. I have a red beard. I'm the only one. Okay. Back to the matter at hand. Questions? Kate, how are you doing? You ready for the exam? Sweet. Jocelyn? You good? Claudia? Zara? It's okay. You good? Do you have any questions? Absolutely none. She is on top of it. She has the utmost faith in her notes. Emily, how you doing over there? Yeah. Class is going okay? Yeah. How's everyone's stress level right about now in the semester? Scale of 1 to 10.
Like a 7.
You're at a 2? Brother, I'm at like an 8. You said 7?
Yeah.
Ilam? 5? All right, fair enough. Jose? 7? All right. Angel? 6? Lydia's at a -1. Oh, but actually, Lydia, you doing okay?
Like a 7.
7? Cade? Scale of 1 to 10. What's your stress like right now in the semester? You're not stressed at all? He's the -1. Jocelyn? You're not stressed? Nice. Claudia? 6? Sarah? 6? Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, that sounds about right. 6s, 7s for week 6 with finals in sight. Wondering how you're going to fit it all in. That feels about right to me. No, Emily, didn't I ask you? Oh, what is it? Like a 1? Oh. Okay. Well, I'm jealous for all of you that are not stressed. Just relaxing. All right.
There's no class next week, right?
I am not. I cannot require you to be here next week. That will be my answer to that question. I will still be recording a lecture on Tuesday. I can't afford, in an 8-week class, I can't afford to take an entire week off from the class. Otherwise, I'm teaching you everything in 7 weeks, and there is just not enough time for that. So I will be recording on Tuesday. Not on Thursday, obviously. So you guys are not required to be here in the class on Thursday. If you do show up, if you drive yourselves, the main reason why they say I can't require you to be here is because the buses won't be running. I don't know how many of you drive yourself or how many of you take the bus, but I will still be here in the classroom. And if you come on your own anyway, feel free to join. But I will still be uploading a lecture and still expecting you to do the work. Odessa College Thanksgiving break starts Wednesday, which means that up until Tuesday night, as far as I'm concerned, there's still expectations to meet. Yeah.
So, so will there be any work during that week, like a discussion or a lab?
Yeah. Oh, right. Thursday is Thanksgiving next week. I'm not going to open an exam for you guys on Thanksgiving. I hope you don't perceive me as a cruel man. Yeah, it'll need to be the next Tuesday then. So a week from today. No, 2 weeks from today. Yeah, it'll need to be 2 weeks from today. The 3rd is when you'll have your lab exam. And the last day of the semester, I believe, is the 10th or the 11th. So your final will be probably the 10th. But I'll open that. Okay. Well, I haven't heard any other questions about the exam. Ilham? You good? Okay. Okay. Well, if everyone's good, I'm going to end the recording here and open the exam.